So, given that I've used the Light Phone 3 now for about 7 months, I feel ready to give my impressions on it within the context of a formal review. Apologies, I will be looking down for a good amount of this review because I have my MacBook Pro from 2017 on hand. And I'm using this for my review that will come next week of the 2017 13-inch MacBook Pro, and it's not going to be particularly favorable. Anyway, so for the key points, wherever the Light Phone 3 review is concerned, I would say the Light Phone 3 is for you if you need to take back focus from your smartphone. The Light Phone 3 is for you if you can figure out a way to access apps and services that it doesn't support but that are necessary to your life. And the Light Phone 3 is for you if you have exhausted all other means through which you can avoid these distractions put onto you by simply just having a smartphone. So to start, I just want to sort of break down my history with phones. So my first experience using a dumb phone obviously was during my youth. We had a series of wireless home phones in my house growing up, from which I would make calls if I had to. I was and still am a little shy when it comes to making phone calls, especially if it's to people that I don't communicate with super often. At that point, all that I'd really known was the home phone. But by the time I was in 5th grade, my mom, she got a phone for work, to be specific, a BlackBerry. Although I can't remember which model she had at the time. I know at some point she had like a Bolt. If I remember that correctly, I need to learn more about BlackBerries. But because she got this work phone, she gave me her old LG flip phone. This bad boy right here. It's very yellowed now on the buttons, but just a simple LG flip phone with Verizon branding on it, and a camera. Actually, probably one of the first cameras I ever used. And so she gave me this flip phone so that I could let her know what I was up to on weeknights after school, by the time I was in middle school. I vividly remember playing a game on this once, without realizing that the game used service. And so I came down for breakfast on one Saturday morning, and my mom was holding a huge phone bill for that month because of the game. I think it was kind of like Brick Blast, or so. I came down for breakfast on Sunday, and I had a huge bill, and I panicked. I lied, said that I had no idea what she was talking about, and I very well did. And so I had this phone for a couple of years until I got a Verizon exclusive, the Motorola Z Play Droid. That was in 2016 in the fall. Got this bad boy. It's probably the biggest phone that I've ever used for an extended period of time. Has a case on the back. I can take the case off pretty quickly. Yeah, so it has the pogo pins on the back for the Moto mods. I'll put that up on the screen as well. Classic. So yeah, I had that until 2019. Until 2019, I had the Moto Z Play Droid, and in 2019, in the fall as well, I got a green iPhone 11. And I used this iPhone 11 until freshman year of college, when I bought a Light Phone 2 on eBay in February of 2023. I used that Light Phone until January of 2024, when I lost it and couldn't find it. Apple's Find My would have been incredibly useful in this scenario. I then went back to the iPhone 11 until early April of 2024, or until early April of 2025, when the Light Phone 3 I pre-ordered for $399 in the summer of 2024 finally arrived at my parents' home in New Hampshire. I also ordered a case for the phone, and I've used the phone with it ever since, which leads us to where we are today. And this is my Light Phone. It's the Light Phone 3. I have this case on it. It's very nice to hold, very nice to use. That's it. Why eliminate distractions, and why do it in this way? So given that I have used this phone for about 7 months, I feel ready to give my impressions on it within the context of a formal review. First things first, we must discuss why this product exists. As the name suggests, this is the third installment from Light in the dumb phone space. We have had dumb phones since the first telephone. Prior to smartphones, the notion of the smartphone seems to have materialized as mobile phones, portable music players, PDAs, and pagers all separately developed. As time progressed, and as people gathered all these devices for daily use, the notion of one mobile device to rule them all seems to have developed. Devices like the BlackBerry became ultimate productivity machines as a combination of PDA, mobile phone, and email machine. Then came the iPhone, and this device really revolutionized the mobile handset space and brought about the smartphone industry that followed in its wake. However, it is not the iPhone itself that got us to where we are today. Instead, it was the App Store that released with iPhone OS 2 and the iPhone 3GS, aka the iPhone 2, that did this. The App Store allowed developers to enter into Apple's end-to-end system in a democratized fashion, meaning, in other words, that anybody could develop an app for the iPhone. Android followed suit, following in Apple's footsteps, and while Android and Android devices are contemporarily looked upon as having more features than the iPhone's hardware and associated operating system, it was the iPhone that came first and accordingly shaped an entire industry. Tangent about Android versus iPhone aside, by having an app store like this available to consumers and developers, a symbiotic relationship developed in which people were being rewarded for making viral apps in terms of recognition at being on one of the App Store's top lists. At the same time as the advent of the App Store was also the coming of social media. Social media came in full force in the wake of the dot-com bubble and benefited from an appetite from entrepreneurs and investors who were looking to profit off of and economize the internet. Now that the internet was in people's pocket, and with a camera attached, social media was able to take off properly with an outmoding of websites like MySpace in favor of the apps called Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, Twitter, Vine, and later Musical.ly and others. The smartphone was the perfect companion device for this burgeoning social media industry. Like how it wasn't the smartphone hardware itself that brought on the advent of the smartphone, it is social media and the need to profit off of one's attention that has become the problem with smartphones. In theory, smartphones are the ultimate utility. However, the utility of this device is hijacked by apps aforementioned that are designed to capitalize upon your attention during all waking hours of your day. Accordingly, it is not the smartphone that is the problem, but what we do with it that is. The issue is what modern dumb phones address. The Light Phone 3 is among the devices leading the charge in this space. There are other workarounds like e-ink smartphones such as the Hisense A5C, or you can use accessibility settings on your phone to turn the device's display into a lifeless black and white utility machine. Something like a flip phone or light phone are the ultimate hammer, going so far as to eliminate even email from the device in the name of providing no distractions to their users. Anything Light's design team determines to be a distraction is removed from the phone. The phone's OS is simply a skin and fork of Android 8.1 Oreo, and you can put a similar type of skin on your full-featured Android phone to limit distractions. I hear that iPhones now also have similar launchers as well. But the Light phone eliminates distractions to such a degree that it is difficult to get anything else on the device than what the creators provide. It is nearly impossible and incredibly arduous to get outside of the Light phone's 3 walls without using another device. Going this far to eliminate distractions from your life seems to say more about human nature more so than anything else. By making it so difficult to get around the device's walls, we no longer need to rely on self-control to achieve the life we want wherever our phones are concerned. Because the device does not need us to practice self-control, we no longer need to trust ourselves 24/7. This is a disappointing realization, to say the least. However, if limiting ourselves to this degree is what we must do to make progress in our lives, then it is what we must do. Besides, these social media companies put so much effort into making their service the most addictive hijacking of human nature that, within this context, the wave of dumb phones doesn't seem to be so extreme. I described the notion of single-use technology in the first video I posted on YouTube. The Lightphone 3 is an expansion upon this concept in that it forces users in terms of what they can and cannot do on their device. By having something limited, we are forcing ourselves to have a limited experience, and this is a good thing. Now for the review. The Lightphone 3 review. I really liked my Lightphone 2, and I really like my Lightphone 3. Each edition of the Lightphone has added more features as the design team for the device identifies more utilities that can't be abused as distraction. The Lightphone 3 added an OLED screen to the device, more hardware buttons, a camera, and a few other interesting, 2 cameras that is, and a few other interesting features. These additional features provide more utility to the device, and that is something I really appreciate. The only major thing I would want to add to the Lightphone 3 is more communication features, such as Messenger, Outlook, WhatsApp, Teams, Slack. You get the idea. By adding this to the device, I wouldn't have to lug around an iPad mini in the case that I need to immediately respond to a message on one of those services. And if you don't carry around a smart device to be contacted on those messaging services, then the people around you and the people with whom you interact, they ought to adapt for your sake. I can tell you from experience twice that this is quite difficult to get everybody in your life to do that. Aside from that, the Lightphone 3 has pretty much everything. The available apps on the device include a simple lock screen that tells the date, time, battery life, cellular connection status, hotspot status, and whether you have a notification, a passcode to enter into the device, a ringer menu that allows silent, vibration, and various degrees of ringer volume, a home menu that includes phone for texting and calling, alarm for setting alarms, album for viewing photos and videos, calculator for doing math, calendar for documenting appointment times and dates, camera for taking photos and videos and selfies, directions for finding routes to destinations, directory for information about stores and other places, hotspot for hotspot things, music for listening to MP3 files that you upload from your computer using the Light Web tool, notes for taking notes, timer for timing things, and settings that offer a series of options, including airplane mode, notification preferences, general preferences, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi settings, and account and info preferences. This is a near comprehensive list of what the Lightphone 3 offers and can do. You decide which apps to put on the device from an online portal that I mentioned before, and I believe that in my list I did skip out on the podcast feature. Beside that, I have used all of the features that I mentioned, and I believe they all work well for the most part. I have a few critiques I'll get to in a moment, but I would first like to discuss the Lightphone 3's specs. They are, in no particular order, a Snapdragon 4 Gen 2, 128 gigabytes of storage, 6 gigabytes of memory, a 50 megapixel rear-facing camera and an 8 megapixel front-facing camera, a 3.96 inch display with a resolution of 1240 by 1080. It is AMOLED. IP54 water resistance, an 1800 milliamp hour battery, Bluetooth 5.0, and 5G bands. There's very little about these specs that is impressive, and that's part of what makes this device special. Few of those specs matter even to this point because it's not about what the phone can do, it's about what the phone can't do, and that's what matters. I will say that what it can do is still pretty good. Thanks to the OLED screen, the Lightphone 3 is much more responsive than the low refresh rate e-ink screens on the previous 2 iterations of Lightphone. Light found a way to have a higher refresh rate display without compromising on the intention to eliminate distractions, and I'm glad they did. They're still missing some features you'd expect, like a scroll animation, but I suppose that having that would make scrolling on the device too enticing. Furthermore, the display does support color, and this is something you will only come to find when viewing photos or videos on the phone. You can also send the photos and videos you take on the phone through the phone menu to one of your contacts. However, the quality of the photos and videos, it's quite bad, and the quality you can get from sending them over text is even worse due to the file compression that goes on. In the spirit of harping on what the device does poorly, the most disappointing app on this phone is by far the Directions app. It is incredibly limited, and I expected much more from it. The app often operates in offline mode, which makes it nearly useless. The app often fails to update your location as well, so you have to manually put in your location and your destination, and these two things make it quite difficult to use the Directions app. Additionally, the app always defaults to expect you're looking for walking directions, and it erases the destination when you go back to change it to driving or public transit. Often it does that. Sometimes it doesn't erase the destination. It's kind of confusing and quite erratic. The map also lacks color, which I think is a big miss, because that makes it much more difficult to tell where exactly the phone is telling you to go. And just from a basic accessibility perspective, it's a rather inaccessible app for people that have certain disabilities. There are some settings in the Directions app which you can change, perhaps most importantly, to allow you to go from the metric unit system to the imperial unit system, if you're a user of the imperial system, as I am. Nevertheless, for all the aforementioned reasons, you can't always rely on this device to get you where you want to go. Or to help you get to where you want to go. The last issue I have with the phone in the context of the Directions app is that the phone may sometimes ask to do a software update while you're using the directions, and it will force the update on you after you tell it not to multiple times, and it'll quit the Directions app without your permission as it restarts. This has happened to me many times and has almost left me stranded multiple times. Additionally, there aren't really any offline features in the Directions app, so you may very well be screwed if you try going somewhere and you don't have great reception. If you choose not to have an extra mobile device that is smarter than a Light Phone 3, I'd recommend you buy a map when you get the Light Phone 3 or before, or print out directions for wherever you want to go. You could also rely on somebody else with a smartphone to get you where you want to go. Aside from the Directions app, I have found one more difficulty. Sometimes the phone hallucinates and it thinks an old text you've already read hasn't been read. This will make it display that you have a notification, a little asterisk, even though you actually don't. Additionally, the vibration mode on this device is horrid. So if you're in the vibrate ringer mode, you'll often miss texts until you look at your phone for whichever reason that you would look at your phone for. Additionally, the music app could be much better. If you could log into Spotify or Tidal on the device through the web portal, that would make music streaming so much better. Additionally, with the current solution of uploading MP3 files through the web portal, you can organize the order of the songs you have through playlists or even generally. They just appear on your phone in whatever order that it decides, and that's it. As such, the 6 things I think this phone can improve upon is allowing more messaging services, improving the Directions app, maybe simply just allow Google Maps to run on the phone, stopping the update service from forcing updates on the user despite them declining multiple times, adding music streaming services, having a better vibration motor, and ceasing to display that you have a notification even though you don't. Aside from these 6 things, this phone itself is great, and it accomplishes what it tries to do. It forces the elimination of distractions from your phone. The design of the device is also very impressive. It feels quite high quality, very strong build quality, and it should, since it is coming in at its new price point of $700. Why must it be the Light Phone 3 and not something else? For me, the only reason I got the Light Phone 3 and not another Light Phone 2 is because of the 5G support. Light Phone 3 has 5G, whereas most other dumb phones do not. Additionally, the 5G bands on this device seem to be pretty good, and it makes phone calls sound a lot better, and it allows you to use your phone in areas that may have somewhat poor service. The Light Phone 3 has leg up on pretty much every other dumb phone. However, Light Phone is now $700 since the pre-order pricing has stopped. And because of this, I would recommend a few alternatives before recommending that you spend iPhone money on a somewhat useless phone. First, put a skinner launcher on your phone or change your phone to grayscale mode. By doing this, you make it more difficult for your smartphone's addicting apps to affect you. By going this route, you can customize what you can and can't use. So in my case, I would choose to have a good directions app and more messaging services, Facebook Messenger, Outlook, Gmail, Teams, etc. If I went this route. However, I find it too easy to bypass these options like the skin launcher, and it's even easier to take your phone out of the grayscale mode. So second, you should try using a modern flip phone. These are pretty good nowadays, quite cheap, and they can do much of what the Light Phone 3 can do, aside from the fact that, as previously mentioned, most have poor cellular reception, poor call quality, and pretty much no hotspot. If you can live with these downsides, a flip phone it is a great option. Third, you could try using a Light Phone 2. They're $299 new, I believe, and they're even cheaper when used. eBay, Facebook Marketplace. And this is a step up from a flip phone in terms of how it feels and how you use it. And that is something that's reflected in the price of the device. It doesn't have USB-C either, which is kind of a big deal. Instead, micro USB. So, factor into the cost that every few months you have to spend $15 more on a micro USB cable. Anyway, the Light Phone 2. The Light Phone 2 is a great option if you're okay with not having a phone compatible with 5G. I would definitely recommend it if you can't find a cheap way to get a Light Phone 3. If you've exhausted those three options, I would then recommend you pick up a Light Phone 3 for yourself. As previously mentioned, it's a great product, very nice to use. The big glaring issue is price. Originally, they were saying it was going to be $800. They already lowered it by $100 to make it more marketable for people. Even so, it's too expensive for me to recommend outright. So I have all of those qualifiers for you to try with your money first. Aside from that, it's a great device. If you buy the screen protectors from you get a few, which is useful. The case isn't super expensive, and it's a lot nicer than the Light Phone 2 case was. The speakers are pretty solid, although a little quiet. And yes, this concludes my review of the Light Phone 3. Hope you enjoyed it. You know where to find me. All right. See ya.